Shalom and welcome everybody to the Unexpected Cosmology Thursday Night Live. School is in session. Now, earlier today, I posted a picture in the family album here in the Discord page showing Rick Hummer and his wife Tabitha with Dave Marsh, Paul on the Plane, and myself. And that was taken in Dallas in 2019, just about 2 months before COVID took off. Really, one of the greatest psyops in human history had already been a go at that point. None of us knew about it, but it was at that bar, perhaps that very hour, when Rick Hummer, who is the guest tonight, first introduced me to this mud flood theory. Now, I talked about that a little bit the last time he came on, so I don't need to repeat it again. However, I do want to state this before we start. This last week, my wife and I moved down to Florida, and we're living in our RV right now. Hopefully, I get good internet and there's no hiccups. This is our 7th annual in the year in our RV because we're strange like that, and we like moving out of our house, living in our RV. Well, last Sunday, when I arrived here in Florida, I got the terrible news that my friend Sean Matthews died. Sean Matthews was just a few years older than me. He wasn't that much older. And it was soon after that photo was taken that so Rick Hummer introduces Mud Flood and Tartaria to me. I was on the phone with Sean Matthews, and he's the one responsible for really selling me on it. He actually brought it up on the phone. And I was like, sell me on this mud flood thing. And I could hear him grin on the other side. And for the next hour, he just unleashed it on me. And one of the things I always remember he said that he believed that this society that lived before the mud flood was a peaceful, loving society. And my first response to him was, that's impossible because they're all a part of the beast government. They couldn't have been peaceful. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking, well, there's only one peaceful government I can think of, and that's the Messianic government. And Sean Matthews he actually appreciated this when I said this. I referred to him as my red pill dealer. And a lot of you know that I published a book with Zen Garcia recently called The Hidden Hand of Camelot, and Sean Matthews was responsible for much of that research. He was like a research partner for me. He was the one that first introduced me to the idea that JFK was never assassinated, that it was all a hoax. He was the one that first took me through the Zapruder film footage, and he never wanted credit for it. But if you actually read the article or saw it in the book, I end it with a picture of Jimmy Carter, inferring the possibility that Jimmy Carter really is John F. Kennedy. And I know that's a wild assumption to make, and it may or may not be true, I don't know, but that was me paying homage to Sean Matthews because he was adamant that Jimmy Carter is John F. Kennedy. And so I just want to kind of dedicate tonight's show to Sean Matthews. Again, he died suddenly. It was a heart attack. He was on the phone. His wife said he just dropped. He was dead on the spot. And it's just a reminder to all of us that we don't know which day, day to day, when our life will be called and how long we have to live. All we have to do is live the best we can for our Savior, for Yahuwah, the Most High, and be obedient to Him, because we never know when we're going to get called home. So this is dedicated to Sean Matthews. Now tonight, I have Rick Hummer as a guest, as I mentioned before I bring him on to talk, because he has a lot he wants to say. It was last Thursday, I was talking to Rick on the phone, and he was literally melting my brain. Like, it was like he was talking, and I'm like, this is incredible stuff. And I stopped him. I said, where are you getting this information from, and who have you told this to? And I can't even remember his response, but I was like, we've got to get you on. We've got to talk about this because people need to hear about this. And I think all of you will really appreciate what he has to say tonight. Does anybody, before we get started, I do want to pray. And does anybody have a shofar available? Polly, do you have a shofar with you tonight?
I've got one, Noel.
All right, so let's go ahead and pray quickly, and then when I say may amen, feel free to blow it or give it a loud toot. Our dearest Father in heaven, Yahuwah, the Most High Elohim, we come before you tonight, appreciative of thanking you for making yourself known to us. I mean, it is a gift just to know you, and we know that it is you alone who awaken the eyes and the hearing ears of each set apart saint. It is only you that brings us back into the fold, into Israel. And we just pray that we would continually be repentant of our sins, that we would turn away from the ways of the world, and that we would find your ways beautiful, that we would understand that your Torah, your law, is a reflection of who you are, it is a reflection of your face. And we want to be obedient to you because we want to spend an eternity with you. So I pray that you would bless this discussion we have tonight, that you would lead us to all truth, and amen.
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 All right, I heard, I heard some, I heard a toot going down. So I think that's good. And also, one more thing before I bring Rick Hummer on, I do want to give a book giveaway tonight. I promise that, and I want to give a book away each and every week to those who come. So, the last few weeks we've been reading from extra biblical literature. We read from the Revelation of Moshe, the Testament of Job, and the Infancy Gospel of Yaakov. Now, two of those books can be found in a book called Testaments of the Patriarchs and Prophets, which is put out by Sacred Word Publishing, and it's edited by Zen Garcia. So I will be handing that out tonight. Dave, are you able to? How long would it take for you to compile a list and do a drawing?
Give me 1 minute.
Okay, so we have 1 minute. The good news is that when we put this video onto YouTube, I can just cut all this out. So when Dave says, give me 1 minute, it'll be like 2 seconds later, and it'll be like, boom, it'll just do it.
Feels like we're the audience just waiting for the little sign to light up saying, like, applaud.
All right, I'm
Yeah.
hitting the button. And the winner is Donkey.
All right, Zach, I'm going to be sending you a copy, and I'm not sure that I actually do have your address. So be sure to send me your address. I will send this. I think you're really going to like this book. It's going to be a hardback. It's going to have tons of really amazing reads in it. So thank you for showing up tonight and listening. Okay, with that, I want to bring on Rick Hummer. Oh, yeah, I'm going to read this passage first. This is going to be our theme verse, I think, for the night. And hopefully, Rick will kind of steer us back into this verse later. This comes from Proverbs 20:12. So think of the 20 and the 12. The hearing ear and the seeing eye, Yahuwah hath made, even both of them. All right, with that, Rick, are you there?
I am here, Noel. Thank you for having me again. I appreciate everybody's encouragement and just looking forward to everybody spending some time together. I always look at shows like this as fellowship and a learning time and a growing time. So I just I humbly thank you for having me on, and also your friendship. So there you go.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate it too. So, I'm going to just hand it over to you, Rick, and we wanted to obviously talk about the mud flood tonight and its relationship to perhaps whether or not the Millennial Kingdom happened. It's something we're definitely looking into. We don't have concise answers on that, but it's something we're obviously not afraid to look into as a possibility. So take it away. What are your thoughts?
Well, I guess first and foremost, I mean, I am, last time we spoke, I said, somewhat at ground zero, just like I think anybody. We've all seen the same images now. Some of us have actually seen them in person, of the buildings that are, 3-4 stories below ground with windows on the exterior walls. You can obviously see there's devastation in the early photos. There's mud on the streets. We've all seen that. And it's a touchy subject anyway with Christians, because a lot of people don't even know about this. If I hadn't been told by a high school teacher about the 1812 earthquake, and I remember that vividly because years later there was something on TV about it, and I remember going, "Oh yeah, I remember Mr. Mawson talking about that." I would have never, it would have never I would have never actually gravitated toward the subject. I don't think. So I believe that everything that happens has a purpose in our lives if we're looking at it, and we can retain it, and obviously not afraid to hear about it again. There's your Proverbs 20:12 coming in already. So it's one of those things where when you see this, you know, obviously the first question I had is, well, how does this fit into Scripture? Where could it fit into Scripture? If something like this happened, where there's a worldwide quote unquote mud flood, what would even cause the mud? What you know, where were there mountains? Was there landslides? I've seen the video here recently of the mud floods overseas, or whatever you want to call them, the landslides, and it's just like the whole ground is moving. So I just look at it from a standpoint of going, it's a very interesting topic, especially when you bring in the biblical properties to it. And I think many of us have been humbled in our lives, knowing that some of the things that not only did we believe, but we studied for, we studied our butts off to get good grades on our tests. Some of us didn't study, some of us did, but I'm saying when you go through your whole, early age, preteens, teenage years, all the way up until you're 18 years old, you're being tested on regurgitating the information that you've been given. And then you have pop culture backing it. And you have, obviously family discussions, if you even get that far on that type of deep stuff. And what I found is I don't find a lot of people that are interested in it because they've not been introduced to it. And it's still fairly new. I mean, you're talking about Dallas. I mean, I wasn't that much further along looking into it than when you and I sat and we were talking about that, Noel. And that was one of those things. I'm like, have you seen this yet? Because I'm like, Noel will dive into this if he sees it. And I'm glad you did, because I think you and I were talking on the phone, I don't know how many months ago it was now, but I actually said that to you. I said, hey, is it possible that the millennial reign already happened? And I remember right away you were like, dude, yeah. I mean, it was one of those things like, okay, because it just kind of came to mind, that whole thing. And if that's the case, first and foremost, why did I even think that? Where did that thought even come from? I've never really thought that deep about that. But what an incredible hiding that's gone on for how many generations now do we even know? And, what's always intrigued me is the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages is something that's always intrigued me, because it always made me, I always thought the it's like, okay, if they lost count of the year, but all of a sudden they say, oh, no, there's 500 years missing. How did they know it was 500 years when they started counting again? Somebody didn't quit counting if they knew it was 500 years. And so none of that ever made sense. And one of the things that always came to mind is how they'll change, times and seasons. Is it times and seasons? What's the exact verbiage? Oh, I should have pulled that up. I think it's times and seasons. Am I right on that? Can somebody help me on that? I can't see the chat because I'm on a phone.
Somebody could look that up and
Times and laws.
I think it's
Times and laws.
change
What is it?
ordinances.
Ordinances. Okay. So does that only pertain to one kingdom? Does that pertain to the entire world? I mean, I guess contextually I need to look that up. But that's something that popped into my head on that, because if that's the case, boy, wouldn't things change if the millennial reign happened? Wouldn't ordinances change if the millennial reign happened and all of a sudden somebody else is unleashed? And my question then is, where does everybody go? Where does Jesus take everybody? Where does Yeshua take everybody? Where do they go? What happened? And where are they at? And are we doomed because we missed it? And I've heard people say this. Noel, you brought this up. There's people that say, "Oh, you're taking away the hope, the hope." Well, what hope? What hope are you talking about? Something you can take? Isn't the main goal eternal? isn't the main goal. So whether it's the mud floods or because of the product of the end of a millennial reign, and say that that somebody's unbound, and here we are. If that's the case, we could be we're actually closer to spending eternity with Jesus and with Yeshua. And I just look at that and go, here we are. We're at a point in time where, and I said this today to Noel on the phone, if people are so threatened to discuss this, I don't know why, because whether or not the millennial reign happened already, whether we're quote unquote in it, or whether it's yet to come, our main goal should be to spend eternity with our Messiah. And our love shouldn't change for him if the calendar's different to us than what is reality. In other words, our main focus, no matter what the reality is of this, we have to love the Most High more than anything or anyone. And we need to love the truth. And that's why we're all here, I believe. I don't think that there's even people that aren't in this chat tonight that might be listening. The reason why you're listening is because you're looking for answers. And you don't get that on your own. And maybe I can jump into that Proverbs 20:12. The hearing ear and the seeing eye, the Lord hath made even both of them, or Yahuwah made even both of them. If, in fact, people are waking up to so many things right now, and their eyes and ears are working like they've never worked before, then maybe we're onto something. Maybe this is part of the God revealing and his spirit being poured out over all the nations. Maybe we are in the last days. Maybe there is a wrath getting ready to get poured out. And that wouldn't
add to that real quick?
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier today, and one of the things I am getting from some of the people who oppose this discussion is they do bring up that I and others who are proposing this are taking people's hope away. We are, we're just this big Debbie Downer, and it's like, wait a second here, because in Second Esdras, it talks about how that the earth is this womb that all these souls are proportioned to their time. We were appointed to this time. And I could look back through history and go, man, I missed out on Eden. Oh, Adam and Eve screwed that one up. Or, oh, I wish I was on the mountain of worship. Or what about being in the presence of Yahuwah at Mount Sinai? With the trumpets blasting, the fire and the pillar of fire going over if I could pick any generation to be in that I missed out on, it would be crossing the Red Sea and the wilderness generation. But then beyond that, you have hanging out with Elijah, Eliyahu, or how about Yahusha? There's a good one. And all these things happened, and I wasn't a part of it. And so I can't choose where I'm appointed to be in history, but the outcome is still the same. The decision is I have to choose the blessing or the curse, and I have to make that decision to take the narrow path, whether I'm the sons of Adam, the sons of Noah, the sons of Abraham, whoever. They all had to make that decision, and here we are. It's like we were discussing earlier that we are just, I think you would phrase it, Rick, that we're basically like the preface of the first paragraph of a entire volume of history. Like the story hasn't even begun to be told yet.
Yeah, that's what I said. The story hasn't even started yet. I mean, when you talk about eternity, because if in fact we are no matter what, if we are at that brink, whether it's almost the millennial reign time or post, and now here we are, we're watching Satan do his thing, or I should say our adversary do these wonders that we're all wondering, how are they doing this? How are people falling for this? How is this happening? Well, I can tell you this. It doesn't matter what time it is. You just hit the nail on the head. Our job and our main goal is to make him our main reference to every single thing, every single facet. And yes, if it's eternity that we're talking about, we're not even on chapter 1 yet, because eternity hasn't started. And so we are the preface. We're the preface of the entire like you said, the novel or the entire library that we don't even have a clue what that's going to be like. We can't even fathom how wonderful that's going to be. So anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but it's true. It's we're not in eternity yet, guys, and that's the whole thing, and that's our main goal. Our main goal is to, pray to be found worthy every day, and to do the best that we possibly can. And I think I said last time, I fail miserably. I fail miserably. I'm no way, no how can I step out of a boat and walk on water. I know that that's not even possible without him there. I'd be sinking like Peter. What am I doing? So it's one of those things where we're at right now, I look at it this way. I'm seeing things, and there's so many things. The biblical cosmology side of it, with the firmament and all that, how many years ago was it that it popped off? Like 5, 6, 7 years ago that it started, and people started waking up to it, and it just spread like wildfire. Then I started seeing the mud flood things kind of start to pick up right before that conference, and that picked up. And now here we are, we're talking about germs and viruses and exosomes and proteins and stuff like that. And I look at that and go, wow, here we are. We're at that point in time where we're seeing things unfold right before our very eyes, and here we are. We're wondering how it happens. Somebody's pulling off some wondrous things, and how the world is falling for it, I don't know. Except for the fact that God Almighty, the Most High, our Creator, says, I will send a strong delusion that if it were possible, even the very elect could be deceived. And I think the more that we put the pieces together, the more that we show the Most High that we are looking for the truth, that we are seeking Him out. I don't know too many people that will look at the mud flood and not want to reference it to Scripture if they're true truth seekers. And that's not to knock anybody. But my point is that no matter who you are, if you are truly seeking the truth, you are going to find yourself coming to know Christ more than you realize, and probably quicker than you realize, because nobody has eyes and ears for it on their own. God makes them. Proverbs 20:12 tells us this, that He makes them, and He's the one that will actually start acting on a person. He's the one that calls action and action. Here we go. And you start to change, and you start to want to see these things, and you're able to swallow, one red pill after another. Boom, 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 boom. And as that happens, as you continue to learn things, I don't know how anybody can be on the quote unquote label themselves a truther and not have Yeshua in the mix. I just don't know how you can do it. I don't know how anybody can do it, because that's where it's going to lead you in the long run anyway. If you're really truly seeking out the truth, that's where you're going to go. And so if in fact we're getting closer to an actual, say, Isaiah 66:15 incident where God's going to render His anger with fury and flames of fire with His chariots, and plead with all flesh, if that's where we're at, I'm okay with it. It's not taking my hope away. If we're at the verge of the Millennial Kingdom coming down, and Christ saying, "Hey, everybody, come on, let's go, get in here for a while. I got some things going on here, and I'm gonna share some things." And He's built all these structures all over the world, and we missed out on that. And something happened that the mud started to cover it up, or maybe that's what Satan did, was he was trying to cover up the kingdoms with some. I don't know. I can't play the what if game. But my point is that no matter where we're at, we have to give God credit, the Most High credit where credit is due, and that is that He is the one that knows every hair on our head. He's the one that knows when the sparrow's going to fall out of the sky. He knew us before the foundations of the earth. He knew us before any of that, and that's in Romans 8:29. For whom He did foreknow, He also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of His Son, that He may be the firstborn among many brethren. So before God even made any of this, maybe even before before He moved over the face of the deep, maybe before even that, He already had us in mind for this time, this elected time for us to be placed, no matter what your birth date is, for you to be placed in that womb 9 months before you popped out into this world or onto this scene. God knew you way back then. So I don't know how that can take anyone's hope away at all. To me, that argument, and I'll be honest, that argument sounds very selfish and prideful. And it sounds like somebody doesn't want to have to go back and rebut anything that they've taught or said. Because I'm open to it.
Can I jump in for just 2 seconds? It's interesting you guys are talking about hope. I was literally having a conversation with my mom, I think a day or two ago, honestly, and she was juxtaposing hope and faith, and that they are actually almost polar opposites. And Yahusha calls us to have faith, and faith is action, and where hope is very passive. Hope is like, oh, I'm really wishing that this will happen all by itself and I'll be taken care of. Whereas faith is like, I'm going to do stuff and follow the commands and be obedient and do the will, and then things are going to happen. It's two very different concepts. And so I would almost say, if someone says you're taking away, you're taking away our hope, maybe they shouldn't have that hope. Maybe they should have faith instead and be doing actions and doing works and making things with their hands and building relationships and stuff like that, as opposed to sitting back and just waiting for, Messiah to come. He's going to come when he comes. Watch and wait, but that doesn't mean you just sit back and do nothing, right?
Right. I agree. I think, and that is true. I think that hope, if anyone can have hope, I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow. I hope, we get a new puppy. I hope, there's so many things we can hope about, but to have faith is another. You're right. I love that. Thank you for that, because that's, I'm going to use that. That's a great. Did you say your mom said that?
Yeah, my mom was reading some of Paul's stuff, and I don't want to get into the controversial nature of Paul's writings, but she was reading some of Paul's stuff, and he's very pro-hope. And then she was juxtaposing that with what Yahusha said when he was on the earth, and that almost everything he said is rooted in faith. Like, faith and act. Do the thing that I tell you to do. Be obedient to the Father. Whereas a lot of what Paul says is just like, you read his stuff, you see hope all over the place. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I cursed you all with seeing it.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I don't think David had hope that he would beat Goliath.
Exactly.
I don't think he had hope that he was going to take down Goliath. I don't think so. I think he knew and he had faith. Yeah. Well, Thank you.
So Rick,
cool.
you had made the comment earlier about finding Yahusha, Yahusha being the driving point of truth. And if the flat earth movement, which is kind of a funny statement to say the flat earth movement, because flat earth implies geocentrism, so you can't really have movement. But if the flat earth taught me anything, it's that they're hiding the creator. And so when I came to the mud flood and I saw this worldwide huge event where you have these buildings all over the world, there are these huge dome Corinthian pillars on every single continent, and you see on every single continent where there are these buildings buried by 12 feet, 2 stories, 12, 20 feet, and it's not written in any history books. The first thing that I started asking myself is, are they trying to hide the creator? And that, of course, brings us back to, why else? Like, if there was a worldwide disaster, why wouldn't they report on it, right? So whatever they're trying to hide, I think it goes far beyond what most mud flooders are talking about, saying, well, they're trying to cover up free energy or whatever, which they are. They are trying to hide free energy from us, but that is clearly not the scope of this conspiracy, just like flat earth isn't a free conspiracy, a free energy thing either, right? So when we understand, if we can fathom the fact that they are lying to us about this in every city, anybody who's listening to this, you can go test this out for yourself and go to any city in America that is an old city, like Boston, probably Chicago, Los Angeles. There's cities probably here in Florida, St. Augustine and others, Charleston, South Carolina, all
Salt
throughout
Lake.
the Midwest, Springfield, all throughout the Midwest. You go to any of these old cities, and you're going to find that they are buried. That there are in all these old buildings, they are buried below the street surface, and there is nothing in our history books that talk about this. And if you can start to fathom that they are hiding the creator, you can start to see what we are proposing here, that there was the actual physical reign of the Messiah on the earth. And this is one of the reasons I get frustrated when people are calling me like in a box label. They're calling me a preterist or a partial preterist. Yes, it is true that there are some bullet points that I do agree with on a partial preterist position, but you can find that I have agreements with on bullet points of things that probably the evangelical Christians teach, probably the Mormons, the Hebrew roots, and all sorts of things. So it's like, well, why not just call me? Why not just call me any of those, right? If we're going to throw labels at people, what we're advocating here is not that the millennial reign is a spiritual reign in any way, shape, or form. It was a physical on the earth reign. And I want to give this back to you, Rick, but I was thinking about this today, that one of the things that hasn't really been discussed, and we don't need to go down this trail, but anyone who looks into the missing 1,000 years on coins, tombstones, maps, and how we'll say like, well, the year is like 1237 or 1452, and really it's an I or a J for Jesus or Jesus, or X for Christos, and that you can totally see there where there was history went up to like the 700s apparently, and then boom, something happened, and then it picks up again 1,000 years later, and they just continue the flow again.
It was because of wooden nickels, and they floated away in the mud flood.
Okay.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know. Well,
it's like, it is. I never even heard that about the coins, and that's intriguing. I mean, that to me is like, wait, what?
So yeah. So it's interesting because even up into the 1700s, and there are graves in America, like in the New England area, where you can go and you could see it'll be like the year 1787 somebody died, but if you look closely, the one is actually an I for like the year of Jesus 786 or something like that, and they tell us that it's a one. And so really it looks like history in my past videos on the Enochian calendar, where I actually believe that there was about 700 years that after Messiah ascended to the heavens, according to the Enochian calendar, you still have one more week before the introduction of the millennial reign, give or take so many years, which would be about 700 years. And that takes us right up to where history says Rome fell, the Middle Ages began, and where all of our dates come to an end. And then they pick it up again right in like 1780s, 1800, right in then on all maps and coins and other things. So I just want to throw that out there. And
the other quick thing.
So the Colosseum. So go ahead.
No, just super quick. No, I was under the impression that, like from what research I've done, it seems like the calendar for the Watchers being released kind of lines up pretty nicely with a post-millennial reign kind of timeline, so that they, like, them coming out of the earth may have literally caused these mud floods to happen. Now, I wasn't sure kind of your thoughts or even Rick's thoughts on that, but it seems like the timelines are like close enough that it seems like maybe those watchers being released and being released back into the earth from where they were chained below, maybe brought some mud up or caused like a kind of like these landslides and things like that, right?
Well, I'll let Rick. You go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, well, one of the things that it's interesting you brought that up, because that's one of the things I was going to say about the mud floods is, how we have all these supposed meteor craters all over the world. What if they weren't from meteors? Has anybody ever seen mud burp? Have you ever seen mud burp? An air bubble come up out of the mud, and what it does, it actually looks like a crater. It leaves the rim around it. It leaves the main ripple stays, and it takes a while for that to resettle. And you literally have what looks like a crater, like an impact of something coming in rather than something coming out. With the whole flat Earth thing, people have talked about the plasma, that the moon could actually be a form of plasma, energetic plasma, because it puts off its own light. It puts off a negative light. It is the lesser light, the negative light. And it actually, instead of it actually being impact craters, it is actually what you would call a what would they call it? An implosion marks. So if that is the case, who knows? Maybe that's exactly what happened. Maybe the Earth got loosened up. I mean, that'd be one heck of a burp to release these angels that have been bound, and as powerful as angels are, with what we're told, whatever they were bound with, whether it's an energy field, whether it's real true chains, either way, whatever it is, I can only imagine what the power that would be released. But then again, I'm playing what if, or imagine that, and but I'm with you. If that could that have been the cause of the kingdom? And my whole question is, where did everybody go? And why did all the children? Why were all the children shipped around? And my whole thing is one of the things that came to mind when they were talking about the orphan trains, is if Yeshua was able to leave, and then you unleash these, man haters. What do you think they're going to do to the adults that already have met him? And what do you think they're going to do with the children if they want to continue to bring mankind down? Remember in the book of Job, our adversary was not allowed to touch Job until do anything without, God's permission, without his permission. And so I don't think that has changed. So I think there's still rules that apply. But could he go around and kill all the adults so that there's just nothing but children left? That's crossed my mind. That's the what if game that I've played. Even while I'm mowing the grass, I think about this stuff. And it's mind-boggling. What's mind-boggling right now is I can't get off this whole coin thing. It makes me want to get on, every coin auction house that I can and look at the numbers on the coins. Really intriguing. You got me on that one. But I look at this and go, boy, if we're onto this, they really don't want this out. And if we're onto this, then there's something that ties in that we're all experiencing right now. We're all going through it, and this all ties back into this. Okay, I got to speak in code here, but we all know that there's this thing where people are in their homes. They're talking about people being in their homes, not being able to go out, and they're saying that there's this bug that got released from a bat sandwich from the Filet-O-Fish stand in this place overseas that hates us. Not the people, but the governments. Anyway, you guys get where I'm coming from. That thing they want to give people for free by handing out Krispy Kreme donuts and hamburgers and cheeseburgers and beers and joints and lap dances and whatnot, and lottery numbers or lottery tickets and a chance to win $2,500 and $1 million and all this. As long as you let us do this to you, if that thing actually changes the DNA that is the same DNA that God used to make Adam, and that's called flesh, if this thing changes your DNA, it also alters your flesh. It alters the image in which you were made that has his signature on it. And if that's the case and we're there, well, what does he say? Yeshua says, I must come back or there'd be no flesh left. On the timeline, if that's where we're at, and there's no denying that that is actually happening, that people's, unless everything that I'm seeing is fake, but it seems like the stuff that I'm finally getting to see is not stuff that gets to last long because it's being censored. But if that's the case, and the blood is changing, and there's a scripture that says life is in the blood, then I think we have to look at things really carefully and with very much open eyes, with no blinders on, and compare all the notes. And here's my thing: it matches. It looks the same. This thing looks like it could be a mark or a name or maybe a number, because it's got a number to it. And so if we're looking at that, could we literally be looking at a movement to eradicate, not down to 500 million according to the Georgia Guidestones, but the real trick is to annihilate everyone? I'm sorry, but the guys that are behind this, most of them are senior citizens. They don't plan on repopulating. They don't plan on having the Brady Bunch and the Partridge Family reunions. They don't plan on having big families. They can't. They're past it. So my point is that if we're at a point where we're looking at this right down the barrel, I don't know how we can deny that it's worth looking into. I don't know how we can deny that we should really ultimately be going into this very prayerfully, humbly, and looking at it from a standpoint of, wow, if the millennial reign happened, and compare notes here and look at the scriptures, and I need to do this myself, but if in fact we're at a point where if the millennial reign did happen, then we have to be getting close to a full-blown return, or when I say a return, I'm talking about a new heaven and new earth type of thing happening with fire.
Could I add something here, Rick, to what you're saying?
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
So super interesting about the whole pokey poke thing, because it, as far as I know, I think it's Revelation. Correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody could probably look it up. But it says that the last days will be like the days of Noah. And when you look at what the days of Noah were defined as, it was that all flesh had been corrupted. And that's
Corrupted,
the end of
yes.
Yeah.
And Noah was perfect in his generations, or in his genes, he and his boys. And Skiva's done a lot of work on that and talked about that as well. Rob has. And so I look at this and go, wow. The other thing, and you said that, there was something else that popped in my head. What was the other thing I was going to say? Oh, no. What was it how'd you start that? How did you start that? What was the first thing you said? It'll come back to me, I'm sure.
In Revelation, it says that all flesh, it will be as
the days of Noah. Yes. So the days of Noah, yes, of course. What else was going on during the days of Noah? Sodomy, wasn't that happening at that point in time? Wasn't there a lot of quote-unquote science being taught at that time? I mean, wasn't there a lot of things going against already the Most High? And so if that is, yeah. I mean, the Chimera, all of that. There was, they were mixing species. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on at that time. Go ahead. Somebody
Rick,
there?
you had talked to me earlier today about our DNA actually being encoded with the name of the Most High. And
Yes.
I haven't read a lot on that. I actually passed that by my wife, and she had actually researched that, and she's like, "Yes, that's true." Which is funny because sometimes, like, the things I research, she doesn't research, and then I'll ask her, and she has researched it. She's like my research partner, so she confirmed that, and it's interesting because we know that they're with the cookies, the the tickly thing they're giving everybody that they're snipping out codes, and somebody had shared in this group, and I don't have it in front of me, and I was trying to read it from the Supreme Court, where we know that the United States is a corporation, and they are basically, if you are eating these cookies that they're handing out to you, they are saying that your genetics are now different enough that you are part of a patent. They basically, the corporation now owns you. You have been taken out of the image of the creator. You are no longer his DNA, and so you now belong to them. And I read that, and I'm like, this sucks. I mean, it really does. I feel bad for anybody who has now been duped into this, and there is no turning back. You can't alter this now. It's over. It's done.
Can you imagine?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Esau did.
Hey,
it
by
for
the
a
way,
bowl of soup. We do it for a donut.
Yeah. Well, you do the hokey pokey and you turn yourself around. That's what it's all about, right?
Now you could be cookie eater and be in the same boat.
That's true. That's true. That's true.
Rick, earlier when
But-
you were
but-
talking about sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, go ahead. Oh no. Go ahead. There's just a little bit of delay on my end, I think.
I was just gonna say, back earlier when you were talking about how, like, you couldn't walk on water, for example, or like do any of these magnificent feats. I'm wondering if you think there's any correlation between, not only like the damage from GMO foods and fluoride and chemtrails and all that, but like, do you think there's anything that they've been doing to us, including like the other types of cookies we've been fed?
Absolutely. Because I think it's well, first and foremost, let's not ignore pharmakia. Let's not ignore what pharmakia is and what it's called in Scripture and what it's considered to the Most High. And as Noel and I spoke earlier, we're talking about, give me somebody that's in their 60s and show me their prescription list. Show me what they're getting from the pharmakia center. And I look at that, and we're so dependent on that. And, for instance, if we look at the creation, how this all started with water, and God spoke. Well, I believe that when God spoke and said for something to happen, because his voice is so pure and so true that he could actually, with the vibration or the sound or the wave of his voice or the frequency of his voice being as pure as it is, that he could literally manifest things with his voice, which he did, because that's what the scriptures say happened. And since we've been around in our time, growing up with AM radios, FM radios, into, cassettes to, from records to cassettes to CDs to, MP3s to now streaming, if we look at that, everything we listen to is in 440 and not 432. And the vibration, and by the way, the person that has us listen to everything, standard and music recorded in 440, it's one of our adversaries' little cronies. And you'll have to do your own research on that. I don't want to try and get anybody flagged by saying names, but, and I probably said a lot when I said the word pharmakia, but hopefully it doesn't pick up, the algorithm doesn't pick up on that. But if that's the case, yeah, I do believe that. I believe there's a lot of things that we could do differently. One of the, I don't know if I mentioned this the last time we spoke, but I was on another interview, I think, or it may have been this one, when I talked about the faith that Yeshua said that we have to have. The thing that comes to mind is when one of the sentinels had sent for Yeshua because his male servant had fallen ill and was literally on his deathbed, and he sent for Yeshua, and somebody went to Yeshua and said, "Hey, we need you to come back, and the so-and-so's male servant's been done, and he's literally he's one of us, he's been good to us." And Yeshua makes his way there, and people are following, and before he can even get to the house where this male servant's dying, the sentinel sends out his friend and says, "Hey, he doesn't want you to come here. You don't have to come inside. He knew you could do it from where you were." And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think the sentinel came out, or maybe he did. Maybe he did come out, but I know that Yeshua never made it to the house, and he said you could do it from right here. And it didn't take Jesus back. It didn't take him back. It made him turn around and look at his own people, from what I understand. And he said, "This is the faith that I'm talking about. This is the faith that you must have to know that I don't have to be right there. That's the relationship. That's the faith that you have to have." And I've always wondered if that sentinel wasn't the same one that had his ear chopped off. I don't know. I just one of those things. But it made me think about the whole point of this is that I do believe this. The stronger our faith. Why is it important that when two or more are together, and praying, that he's right there? There's something about that the bond, those two prayers coming together in one, and it being more. Is it more powerful? Is it more powerful to have two people praying rather than one? Or is it more powerful to have 200 praying together more than two? It doesn't matter. He's right there. He tells us the same thing. Go to your closet and shut the door. I'm right there. My sheep will hear my voice. Shh, be quiet. You don't have to go through all these crazy rambling prayers anymore. Just listen. I already know your heart. And if we take that and we understand that and we have that faith, what happened when Peter started losing faith? Didn't he start sinking in the water? And he's standing right there. So we could all lose our faith. And I think that's maybe they're telling us something in the movies. Maybe they're telling us something about these quote unquote mutant movies, not about the DNA stuff, but about the powers that these people had. What about these angels? What kind of powers do they have that an angel could take on, thousands, tens of thousands of men in one night and kill them? How's that work? Is that the Flash? Is that Superman? Which one is it? Who is it? What powers does this person have? Does this angel have? And do we have those powers hidden from us? I don't know.
So,
I
Rick,
know that everything's going to be told someday, though. Go ahead.
So, Rick, before we start going in the direction of talking about, I'd really like to return to the thought of energy, vibrations, minerals, and perhaps what caused the mud flood. But what I wanted to quickly, talk about whatever you want. I don't want to steer you away, but I did, before we move too far away from this, I did want to cover this because Josh had brought this up about when the Watchers were released. And when we take the Book of Enoch, the Book of Enoch says that they will be released, and it says that when they're released, they're going to be like these lions released from a cave that are just going to go just topple over the kings of the earth. And we don't see that happen in Revelation per se. But if you can see many different passages that are lifted in Revelation from Enoch. For example, Enoch introduces to us the lake of fire. He's the first book that does it. And then Revelation carries these themes. And so when you see, my big argument is that it works out perfectly if you can see when Satan is released, perhaps that is when the Watchers are released too. Now, if Rick had brought up the Meteor craters, well, I think, and I had written about this before, I don't have the notes in front of me, but if I recall, there are exactly 190 meteor craters on the Earth. By Earth, I mean land, not submerged underwater. Is it close but no cigar? I don't know. That's pretty close to the 200 count. All you need is 10 more underwater. Keep in mind, though, Azazel, the leader of the group, he was buried, many people believe, right around Jerusalem, but that's up to debate. It doesn't really matter. But when he was buried, it was prophesied that he would never come out. He is there for good. He's just going to be judged and thrown in the lake of fire. Like, he's never going to be released. But we saw according to the the 10-week calendar of Enoch, it says, and you could look back at the video I did on that in this group. We discussed the calendar. It says that they're going to go and trample over the homes of the elect, of the set apart, the righteous, right? The ones that were built apparently in the Millennial Kingdom. They're actually released after the Millennial Kingdom, if I'm reading that right. And that's exactly what we're seeing all over the world, not just with the World Fairs, but we're seeing these big, beautiful domed buildings that are being taken over and, given these false histories. And, these are what I believe are the reptilians that run the earth, that rule the earth. What is a reptilian? It's just a seraphim. That's all it is. The very word seraphim, these angels that are in front of the throne of Yah, that have 6 wings. They have 2 wings on their head, 2 wings on their feet, 2 wings to help them fly. The very word seraph in Hebrew means a serpent. It's a serpentine creature. And in upcoming weeks, I hope to talk about this more about, talking about the dragons in the wasteland, because we know that Satan is a dragon. He's a seraphim. I believe a dragon is just another word for a serpentine angelic being. And so these watchers are seraphim. They're the serpentine creatures, and it's crazy to think about the fact that there are good serpents and there are bad serpents. There's evil serpents, and so those are the ones ruling over everything. And I just wanted to kind of cover that in case there were, it seems that we come back on that point a lot, and there sometimes is confusion about some of my conclusions, but. Anyways, Rick, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I'm glad you brought that up because it's important, and I want to go back to this because this is something that you had started the show saying. You kind of asked the question, where did you hear this? You had said, where did you hear this? Where did you get this information? And what I'm about to say is this is something that came to me during the whole flat Earth ponderings. Once I had a lightning strike in front of my house with confirmation, just a lot of really cool stuff that happened. If you guys don't know about that, that's a whole other story. I can tell you about that later. Just some really wild, really cool, humbling experience. But here's the thing. Is everybody here aware and familiar with the Biblical Cosmology? I would imagine so. So, basically a toroidal field of energy is what is around us. But before that even began, what we know is that the Most High went across the face of the deep. We know that water is a natural level. So before he did anything, he had an idea and he started doing things. And there's a verse in there that starts to give us a little bit of an understanding, where it mentions that he basically commands the earth to appear. Now, the water above had already been put above, so he splits the waters first. So the water above and the water below were one time the same water. So the water was now put up above us in a dome, and I'm trying to paint the picture with my verbiage here, with my wording, painting the right picture. So the dome above has been described as molten glass, like molten glass. If any of you have ever seen anybody that does glass blowing or anything like that, you know that it's not solid. It's kind of oozy, but it's also still liquid. And what is glass made up of? It's made up of minerals. Lots of minerals. So when you can get the minerals to melt down and you can get them to ooze and do that kind of thing, imagine the amount of minerals it would take to have the firmament be like molten glass. Which means, if it's like molten glass, it's still moving. It's still able to move. It's still able to ooze. It's still able, now I'm not saying drip, but it's still got some type of a solid yet oozy state to it. That makes sense. So my point is this. If that's the properties of the go ahead. Somebody's on live. Somebody's mic's on. Hello?
Is it Tim Mish 969? Okay, he turned it off.
Okay. So it was really loud. I didn't know if somebody was trying to talk. So, okay. So, oh, there it is again.
Yeah, it's Mish. Thanks. All right. You're good.
Okay. So long story short, here's the deal. If the water above is like molten glass, what was the water below like before God said anything about bringing forth the earth or bringing the earth forth? It was like molten glass. Deep, wasn't it? Wouldn't it be the same thing? And if it is, what would happen to that thick water once God started saying, bring the earth forth? Nowhere in the Bible does it tell us where the earth came from, or does it? Because if we understand properties of water, you can take a glass of water and you can set it outside. And you can let the sun pull all the oxygen and hydrogen out of the water. And you have something left on the side of your glass for the most part. And if you scrape that glass, you can get that little powdery substance to go sit down in the bottom of the glass. And if you add more water to it and let it evaporate again, you got more. If you do it again and you do it again and you do it again and you do it again, what do you have in that glass? You have earth. You have earth. You have dirt. You have minerals. And so when God started bringing forth the earth, when he said, let it appear, my theory behind this is that he extracted and moved the minerals in packs and pockets and large clumps, and it made the water much thinner down here than the water above. And so we have continents and mountains and all of this that appear so that we actually have earth for God to start making the creatures to dwell on the earth in Genesis. So now the water's more fluid. Still contains some minerals in it, but it's not as thick as it is up above us. And it's still very conductive. Water is still a conductor. Certain minerals are conductors. He knew what he was doing when he was making this. But I've never heard anybody explain why the firmament, if the waters were split, why the firmament is like molten glass when the water down here isn't. And I believe there's your answer. Your answer is that God told the earth to appear, and he put the minerals and all of the minerals together that he needed to make what we call earth. That's the earth that he created. That's the ground. The earth is the ground. So he then, out of all the things that he spoke into existence, what did he do? He was hands-on with two things. There are only two things I believe that God made by hand, truly hands-on. And it was Adam and Eve. So we are literally miry clay. Literally miry clay. With a formula, with a brand name on it, with a signature on our DNA, with his name on it. We're from the water. We are from the water. And the beautiful thing is that we're also, how much percentage of our body is water and minerals and other things. And this is why, if we're supposed to keep the temple clean, it's so that we stay more, partnered with the way that God had intended our bodies to work, or our temples to survive, so that we can weather storms and we can weather hard times and hardships and whatnot, and cancers and infections and quote unquote hokey pokey season, so that we don't have to go through with even questioning whether or not we need that. We can take the Psalm 91 shot. So my point is that if in fact we're at that point where we look at the beginning of all this, and it started with that water, and we are literally from the minerals of that water. Wow. Doesn't that make him even more powerful that he could take a giant soupy puddle and turn all of that into this to create a story and to make a story so that we can learn a lesson, so that we can live during the preface of this entire goal that we are out to reach, and that is eternity with our Father, to be reunited with our Father, and not just a concept, but a product. And isn't it something that the adversary would try and do something to us at the very end to turn us into a product so that he owns us? So that he can go before the Most High and say, see what I did? I esteem myself. Look, they put faith in my pharmakia, not you. I mean, this is so simple to me. And I've never heard anybody break down Genesis, and it makes more sense to me. And imagine if they taught that in school. Imagine if they taught that. Imagine if they actually taught that actually God extracted the minerals from the water below, and that's how we got the land, kids. He extracted the minerals. He told the earth to appear, and it appeared right here in this water. But there was a side effect. It made the water a lot more liquidy. It's just amazing to me. I don't know. I just to me that says a lot. That says a lot to me that we're at that point. That it seems like to me a lot of answers are coming forth, and that didn't come to me by anything other than the fact that I started looking at how the frequencies would work under the dome with the sun and the moon, one being positive, one being negative, the light to rule the day, the lesser light, the negative light to rule the night, knowing that the moon is a septic light. All this came to my head because of quote unquote science or testing everything, looking at it and when I say test, I didn't go out and test anything. I have done the moonlight test. I have proven with a laser thermometer that on snow, especially on snow, that you can put the laser in the shadow of the moon and then put it in the direct light of the moon, and it will gain or lose. It'll drop 6 degrees on average. At least it does here in Indiana. So I'm just saying there's a lot that we don't know, but there's a lot that we have before us that gives us the answers, and we will get those answers if we seek. We will find. And he's been very true to all of us. He tells you be careful. You know the phrase, be careful what you wish for, you might get it. Most people don't know that's kind of scriptural. It's very scriptural. He's going to let us go mad upon our idols. You know, the people that are claiming and yelling and screaming, I want to go back to normal. That's not normal to God. The way we've been living is not normal. The way we've held ourselves, and I'm guilty as anybody else. The way that we have treated certain things and been worldly, and it just goes to show. I mean, we're all guilty probably of gossip. We're all guilty of hating on somebody. We're all guilty of lying. We're all guilty of probably stealing gum as kids out of the store. There's so many things that we are all guilty of. And the second that we start pointing fingers at other people and saying, questioning things, or you lose me right away. And years ago, I might not have been lost on that. I might have actually been jumping in going, yeah, that's the dumbest thing ever. But our Father's merciful, obviously.
One thing you had brought up, and I didn't know when to jump in. One thing you had brought up earlier was the firmament being like molten glass. It's kind of like I think you described it as a solid liquid. Did I get that right?
Yeah, it's got a lot more minerals to it. I mean, that's what I was saying. Look at what glass does. Oh, go ahead.
Well, it was interesting because, and you had brought this up while we were on the phone earlier about, I had never seen it, and I don't know if anybody else here has that can refer to it, but there was that National Geographic video.
Oh, yeah.
Where well, go ahead and Tell us about that, because
they've gone. Okay, so we know that we've only been able to drill down, 7.5, a little over 7.5 miles, I believe. Just under 8 miles. That's the farthest that we've been able to drill a hole into the ground, and all of a sudden they hit something they can't penetrate any further. Yeah, whatever. Okay, but what really got me was the video that I saw where I think it was National Geographic Channel, they had put a submarine down into the ocean, and what they experienced was they're in the ocean. These guys are underwater looking at this thing, and what they realize is that there's another layer of water below them that looks like an ocean floor. So they're literally in water, but now there's another ocean floor that when they would try and penetrate it, it would create waves of its own. It would create a wave on this other layer of water. Can anybody else chime in on this? Has anybody else seen this?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay, and they couldn't penetrate that water, could they?
No, it was
dense.
It was too thick, too dense, right?
Yeah, it was. They said they tried to push the submarine down into it, and the submarine would bounce off of it and would not descend past that layer, as if they were floating on top of a layer of water, and that when they did that, it would cause ripples to go to the sides of the rock, which seemed to be like the shore of this water that would go down deeper.
Yes. So what if the same thing was happening with the drill bit underground? To me, it proves. To me, to me, I shouldn't say it proves. To me, it adds evidence that there is something below us at such a depth, and I don't know how deep they were in the water, but the lower that you go in the ocean, you can only go so far. We only have the technology to go so far. And I've seen that with my own eyes as far as video. I wasn't in the capsule. I wasn't in if it was a robot camera. I can't remember if it was a manned sub or not. But to me, it shows there is something down there that nobody has taught about. I've never heard that before. That's pretty important to know if, in fact, they're actually catching the barrier on a certain part of the water below that actually might be much, just as consistent with the waters above.
Well,
that made more sense.
Is this also the great deep that the scriptures talk about so often? We have the oceans, but then we have the great deep. And what fascinated me about this is that we know that we've had multiple witnesses, or some witnesses, come forward who've said that they have gone up as far as they can go. They can't go any further up. There's clearly a firmament up there. We know that they can only dig, as you said, about 8 miles, or as Crazy Chicken says on here, 7.8 miles straight down. And we can only go east, west, south, in a southern direction. They've gone as far as they can in Antarctica. So it's like they figured out now there's nowhere left to go. This is it.
Yeah. And you know what that proves to me? It proves to me that it's the opposite of what they've been teaching us. And they've taught us that, it's infinite, it's infinite, it's infinite. What it proves to me is that it's always been intimate. It's intimate. He made this place for us, to share this place with us. And there's not, Did I lose you guys?
Could I add something to something I saw that kind of falls into the same sort of category of finding the limits of things?
Sure.
So the other day I came across this video. It was in regards to Antarctica and something called blue ice. I don't know, has anyone come across that video?
I've seen it as well. The blue ice, yes.
Well, the interesting thing that I thought was just kind of picked up on, it was talking about a guy who had worked for the military who had put in his application to go to Antarctica as a helicopter pilot. And so one of the many questions that they were asking about was what they believed in. So they wanted to know what their faith was, as far as if they were, Christian, or if they were atheist, or what they believed in. And this guy personally, who had went at the time, he was atheist and very into science, and so he got accepted. And the don't know how true this is. Can't talk to this guy. Just as a video I saw on YouTube, but that they were drilling, and the scientists were studying this so-called blue ice that was basically pure oxygen. It didn't melt, it just evaporated. And when they drilled into it, their machines, whatever they drilled into, and they would stop, it would self-heal itself and close itself back up.
That's
So
amazing.
I
that right there is like, is that the barrier?
That's why they were in Antarctica, and it's crazy because he got accepted, and hundreds of people, applied for this to go be the helicopter repair pilot or person there to work on the bases. And he feels now, as he looks back in his life, that he was accepted for the fact that he had told them that he didn't believe, and that he was based on pure just science and stuff like that. And then whenever they had downtime, they would talk with the scientists. And so when National Geographic and people like that came, they would show them the cores of regular ice, but they would never really discuss this so-called blue ice that was basically just made up of pure oxygen, like so cold you couldn't touch it, just kind of that information. So I was like, it was kind of a trip into that, that it self-healed itself. So like, no matter how hard they tried, they're not going to get out of it. They're not going to get through it. It closes itself back up.
And I remember it, and it took a while for it to evaporate, right, or whatever, to disappear.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but it would just kind of just disappear. You can't take it away from those climates either, because it would immediately just disappear. That's why
it just goes away.
Yeah.
Well, and and the color of that also reminds me of the blue stones. The what's it called? Oh my gosh, they're saying that it could be chunks of the. Say that again. You kind of cut out.
I guess there's a verse that talks about. I have to see what the Bible verse was where that is one of the prophets.
Am I? Hey guys, is this? Hey, I'm on a cell phone. I just need to know: is it breaking up on just me, or is this everybody?
No, it's on everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, you were breaking up there. So
everything that you just said, we missed. I heard him say something about because that to me this kind of ties into what we're doing here, because if they're finding the most purest form of oxygen, and if there was a worldwide flood and there was stuff just washed off to the sides, what else are they there for? Again, it's just, we're never going to know until the time's right.
Yeah.
So, but can you repeat what you were saying about that rock, the blue stone?
So yeah, I want to find this video again so I can get the verse, but there's a verse about one of the prophets. He was describing the expanse above, or something above, that resembled a throne of blue sapphire, of the sapphire stone. So that's what kind of, it was like, they're finding this, pure blue, ice or stone, whatever you want to call it. And, it falls kind of like in line with the scriptures talking about what they seen then as resembling, blue sapphire stone. So it was just very interesting.
Sapphire stone, when they find the blue sapphire stone, when they find this in other places, they found this in other places in the world other than Antarctica, right? When it's an actual stone form.
Well, no,
Has anybody else seen an actual blue stone? Has anybody else seen video of that? Anybody in the chat?
Yes, people have found like parts of the firmament all over the earth.
Yes, and they under the test. Yes, and under the test, don't they actually have a high rate of oxygen within that stone itself?
Yeah, I've heard it was like 90. It was something like 99% oxygen or something. I don't know.
The stone is.
Yeah, that's from what I've seen, from the research that I've done on it.
I'd love to know what the other. I'd love to know what the other elements are on that in that rock, just out of pure curiosity. But yeah, no, I look at this, guys, that we are in such a fascinating time that we're having a discussion like this. I'm walking in circles in my driveway so that I don't lose signal. And, we're at a time right now where we don't know when they could collapse our economy. We could have to go into the wilderness quicker than what we think. And, whether that be off grid, whether that be out in the middle of a cornfield, whether it be up in the hills, I don't know. I'm just saying we know enough now that we know the adversaries at work and we can see it. And there's no greater time than to show people your joy in our Messiah. There's no better time to show that you have faith and not hope. That everything that he says is true. And there's no greater way to die than for your faith.
Hey, Rick.
Beautiful.
Hey, Rick. Let's. I wanted to take this back once again to the mud flood, because you were talking about the minerals and the water and the land coming forth from the minerals and the water and such. And we were talking earlier about what may have caused the mud flood. And I'm curious if you wanted to expand on that. We talked, about the meteors, the meteor craters, which may have been the holding cells of the watchers themselves. But I don't know if it's that in itself, whether that was the same event as the mud flood, if it was event, if it was somewhere in the parameter of a timeline. But what do you think caused the mud flood? Are you still with us?
Yep.
Yeah, he seems
The only
to be
thing that
breaking.
makes sense to me. Oh, hello?
Can you guys hear me? Is that better?
Now,
I can hear you.
we can, Rick. Great.
Yeah.
Okay. So, no, the only thing that makes sense to me about the mud flood is there's two things. One is there were maps, the old maps, prior to 1760, I believe. It showed northwest of Denver area, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was northwest of Denver. Up in the mountains, there was a giant lake in the mountains on the maps. And on the map, and I'll have to find the map. If I wish I had it, I could post it, but I can't call you guys from the house. We've got terrible internet here right now. If in fact these maps were real, there was a giant lake in the mountains that actually showed sea creatures on the drawings, like coming out of the water. Like these things are like something you see in the ocean. So to me, it represented this is salt water. Well, we also know Salt Lake City is a saltwater lake. Yeah, that's why it's called Salt Lake. So if there was a flood of Noah, which we know there was, and as the water receded, we know that sea water would get trapped, or salty water, or marine life could get trapped in mountains as the water receded. Now, what we do know is that going back to the earthquake of 1812, the reports that I've seen was that when this earthquake hit in 1812, that the Mississippi River ran backwards. I believe it was somewhere around Iowa. It ran back to the north towards Minnesota. That was on record. The earthquake that was so big in 1812, wherever the epicenter was for this earthquake. Sorry, my neighbor just went by blaring their stereo. If it could make the earthquake so big that it could make the water run backwards in the Mississippi, something would have to be added to the water for it to begin to rush backwards. You don't just, unless the earth tilted, the ground tilted up. When I say earth, I don't mean planet. I meant the ground. So that you'd literally have to have the topography would have to all change. Everything would have to change. And that's not what they say happened. They said that the water ran backwards, which to me means there was a big rush of water going into that gully called the Mississippi. And it was so great that it actually also, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it changed the route of the Mississippi River. So it went over, the normal land that was down at the bottom at the Delta, and water went in different places at that point in time. So if that earthquake was so great that it could ring church bells in Boston, and the sitting president at the time was recorded saying that he and his wife actually felt the earthquake in their at the estate, or if it was the White House then. I don't know if it was the White House then. It's pretty bad. But if whatever the president's chambers were, they actually felt the earthquake there. So to me, that type of earthquake, could it rattle the ground loose and break free all these lakes? Because that lake that supposedly was there that's no longer there, if it rushed through, well, it sure would explain why it's flat. As soon as you get to the east side of the Rockies, and it's pretty much flat all the way out to the Mississippi. Look at Kansas. That, can you imagine the type of mud that would travel across the plains if there was enough water? What they're saying that, and Canada had a bunch of these lakes as well up in the mountains, according to the maps. Could you imagine what kind of layering would occur with a soupy mix? I mean, that would make sense. That would actually be caused as an aftershock or an after effect of Noah. That could quite possibly be it. That's one of the things. The other thing that makes sense is exactly what you said, Noel, and that is that something came from underground, and like I said earlier, it's almost like a belch, and it, popped, and here they are, poof, released. Let's go get them, boys. Let's go get them.
We're talking about a lot of energy, across the world, and there needs to be something. It seems like there's something tied in here to Yahusha, picking up and leaving.
That's the other thing. Of course. Let's see, if his energy is exactly what I think it is. If you leave that energy, it's gonna the signature energy. Put it this way: when my dad died, when my
Rick?
pops passed away.
Hey, Rick, just a second. Can you hear me, Rick?
I was holding his hands, and he was breathing. Go ahead. Hello.
Yeah, you're just really choppy right now.
Okay. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, it's better.
Okay, sorry. What I was saying was that when my dad passed away in 2002, I'm plugging my phone in as quickly as possible because I think my battery's about to die. No. Hang on. Am I good now? Did I make
You're
it?
good. You made it.
I made it. Okay. So when my dad passed away, I was holding his hands. And this is the best way that I can describe it. He was taking these labored breaths, and we didn't know how long he was going to take these labored breaths. And all I can tell you is there was a point in time where I was talking to my dad, and I basically said, Dad, just, go be with the Lord. Be with him. Go. And he took a few more breaths, and there was a breath that he took the breath in, and literally as the air was going out before it could even come out of his lungs, I felt him leave. And my sister actually asked me, as I felt him leave his body, my sister said, "Is he gone?" And I turned and looked at her, and I said, "Yeah, he is." And the actual feeling in the room changed when my dad left from me, enough to where my sister sensed it as I'm holding his hands. He didn't change. There was nothing changed in his breathing at that point in time until that last breath was actually on its way out. Nothing changed. He just never took another breath. And what I can tell you is, you remember back in the day when we had the old stereos in the car, if you came up to a stoplight, you could lose the signal of the radio station. And as long as you rolled the car forward just about another, 6 to 12 inches, the station could pop back on. And for a split amount of time, it was like I didn't feel right without my dad's energy, if you want to call it energy, or his soul there. His presence wasn't there anymore. And we could feel it. And it took a while to almost like get accustomed to the room without him in there. It's just the strangest way of putting it. But I'm not trying to get into all that energy stuff. But it's true, though. It's like somebody that I had a very strong bond with, I literally felt like the room frequency changed. And it actually made me go, wow. And the same exact thing happened with my grandma when she passed. I was in the room and I actually was holding my grandma's hands when she passed, and the same thing happened with her. So to me, if we had our Messiah here and he took off and left, I can only imagine what would happen. If when my dad left, that I could actually to this in
Okay, you're getting really choppy. You're getting really choppy again, Rick. So let me just
system, this toroidal field. If he came in and built all this stuff, hello.
Yeah,
hello.
You're getting really choppy. Can you hear us?
Okay.
Okay.
I can now. Yes.
Okay, well, let me just jump in here since you're getting a little choppy and just kind of run with this, because I was hoping you would talk about that, because for me, when you were saying that on the phone, that was putting in all the pieces together, and I absolutely agree with this. Yahusha, and this is under the assumption again, neither Rick nor I are saying, you know, gospel truth that the millennial reign did in fact happen. But if it did happen, and Yahusha basically gets up and leaves with the set apart saints, it would be a type of judgment upon humanity. And I don't think it would just be Messiah leaving. There would be a lot of resurrected saints that are getting up and leaving with him. And we're talking about a huge energy shift in the world that could create this judgment. And this is why within the mud flood research, we're seeing like melted buildings and, whole cities just destroyed. I don't know where that is on the timeline, if that is the destruction of the beast in Revelation at the beginning of the millennial reign, or if it's something that happened at the end where we have all these adults dying and just, children everywhere on the earth. Some of the pieces that have been, so to kind of form a picture here of what is happening, one of the biggest problems that have been projected my way or proposed is artwork. All right, so some of you will know what I'm talking about. If you look back at the last 1,000 years, like you look in the Enlightenment period, you see all this beautiful sculptures and artwork, and they tell you, the very term enlightenment, it's very satanic when you look at it. Like, it's just this enlightenment of man. It is man eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil and calling it's a knockoff. They're calling it the tree of life, but it is when the occult was as it is being taught to us in the official narrative, when the occult was kind of coming out. And so you take something like Michelangelo's David, and it is the precision of the human body in sculpture form. And I actually used to ask my one of my art buddies who was really big on this. I'd be like, "So how many statues did Michelangelo have to chip away before he got that perfect? Like, we should be able to see a whole yard of just like discarded statues by Michelangelo." And he was thinking about that. He's going, "Yeah, why don't those exist, right?" So, anyways, when you look at the Renaissance. And then we have the next generation of artwork called Baroque art. And what was really interesting about Baroque art, and this is in the official narrative, guys, what's really interesting about Baroque art is that their fathers before them had perfected the shape of the human body, the shapes, patterns. Well, Baroque art basically took it to this new level of human emotion, but what they started doing is throwing in a lot of pagan mythology, pagan gods, and so on and so forth, occult knowledge. And that has been projected my way of saying, well, or tossed my way saying, well, how do you make heads or tails of this? How do you say that this is the millennial reign of Messiah? Well, here's some things we know about the millennial reign. We know, according to, is it in Isaiah? And I don't have this in front of me. I will give a presentation on this in a week or two. We know that it said that any nations, any governments that So Messiah is ruling the earth, and he has all governments, he's ruling over. And it says that anyone who does not go up to celebrate the feast, that they will be cursed. So wait a second here. So now we have people who are cursed. They are being disobedient while the Messiah reigns on earth. They still have a sinful nature. They're still saying, look, I love this millennial kingdom. This is great and all, and I love the benefits of it, and I want the benefits of it for myself, but I don't want to be obedient. All right. And then you have a number of scripture verses, which I will present, and I thank Rob for bringing those forward to me, on all the wastelands all across the earth where there are multiple scripture passages that talk about the devils and Lilith and all these different spirits and these dragons, and I believe that the reference to dragons is fallen seraphim, that these fallen angels are inhabiting these wastelands like Babylon and other places that were uninhabited during the millennial reign. And this is why we see like these places like Babylon and others being dug up in the 1800s. Really interesting stuff. And what happens if you tell someone, don't go there, right? You're going to have people go, I'm kind of curious to go there and meet these dragons for myself, right? These Lilith and these devils and these Satans. I want to go. Well, they're going to give you the knowledge of the Watchers. And so now we're seeing, as the millennial reign is creeping on, we're seeing more governments rebel. We're seeing more people take this beautiful technology and that they have there, and they're starting to corrupt it, and they're starting to bring in this kind of wicked stuff. They're bringing in the occult knowledge and starting to build. And finally, one day, boom, Yahusha's like, you know what? We're going to pick up. It's all part of the plan, of course. We got to releasing Satan from prison. We're releasing the Watchers, and this is a judgment on everybody. So as he picks up, he leaves. They go wherever they go. We all assume the North Pole. I mean, I would assume that's the best guess. But given the fact that we don't live on a globe, and I think on a globe, they say like 76% of the Earth is covered by water. Don't quote me on that. It's somewhere right about there. Well, if on a flat Earth, on an AE map, on a circular map, that means the southern hemisphere is a lot larger, which means there's a lot more water in the southern hemisphere. Like it would increase from 76 to, I don't know what it would increase to. I've never seen anybody do the math on it. There could be a lot of land hidden down there. Who knows, right? If there's a whole continent down there that we don't know about, especially considering that all flight paths are run by NASA. Most people, even flat earthers, don't know that NASA is in charge of all flight paths. That being said, they pick up and leave. We got this huge, energy shift that perhaps created this mud flood event, this judgment that came upon the whole world that may have melted buildings, cities, buried others, and here we are up to present. So are you still with us, Rick?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I just decided to jump in there because you're getting really choppy. I just wanted to make sure we get you back up.
I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened other than the fact that sometimes it just, it goes out. But no, and I'm with you. And here's the other thing. What happened when Yeshua left after his crucifixion, or when he took his last breath? What happened?
Tell us.
You guys there?
When he gave up his ghost?
Wasn't there an earthquake?
Earthquake. Yeah.
So when he left the temple that he was going to rebuild in 3 days, there was an earthquake. So when he left that time, there was an earthquake. Why wouldn't there be one the next time? That's what I'm posing.
Great point.
Yeah, that could be part of it. Also, that would make sense of the changes at that time.
Yeah, there was all sorts of things that happened in the whereabouts of 1812, and as I've pointed out before, that the year. I don't like to fixate on the year 1812 because anything on the Gregorian calendar they can kind of fudge and lie about. When the true calendar is the sky above us, the stars, the moon, and the sun, right? So from our perspective, 1812 could really be 1776, or it could be 1850. I really don't know. But in that narrative, you have a major volcano that goes off that covers. They said it covered like anywhere the cloud covered anywhere from like a third to 2/3 of the Earth. You talked about the Mississippi River. There were all over the United States these gaseous fumes that came up that were um, basically it was like the stench of death, and people talked about seeing like this like black fog almost.
Sulfur.
Yeah. Another interesting thing that was happening then, of course, and Dave put up 1812 was a very strange year, which I talked about. I talked about a lot of stuff in here. And this is, of course, when the Napoleonic Wars were going on. And one of the reasons I say that the year itself is irrelevant because I have proposed the possibility that the War of 1812 and the American Civil War overlap with both Napoleonic Wars, and I have shown that both Napoleonic Wars may in fact be the same event, meaning Napoleon I and Napoleon III may be the same person. It's a little bit of a mind trip, but if they are the same person, it could mean that the Civil War and the War of 1812 are the exact same thing too, and they're both just explaining, the destruction of the Millennial Kingdom, of what we call Tartaria, which of course Tartaria may just be a play on the word Tartarus, which is where the Watchers were buried, or not the Watchers, I'm sorry, the Titans, where the Titans were buried, which were the children of the Watchers. And so you could see how, in a type of a psyop, the Watchers would say, "Oh, well, the Millennial Kingdom is really Tartarus, right? It's like a, it's a psyop within a psyop, a kind of a or Orwellian language." But another interesting thing that I did talk about in there that happened in 1812 was. There was like an outbreak of what they called back then wild men, and you hear a lot of accounts of wild men in ancient literature, like the Epic of Gilgamesh or some medieval accounts, which also corresponds with the Green Man. But today we would probably call him Sasquatch, and so I think that that's interesting too. That right around 1812, people were seeing these Sasquatch / wild men coming out too. I don't know if that's just some sort of demonic outbreak. I don't know what that was, but that was
hey Noel, was that about the same time that they were snapping pictures with cowboys holding up pterodactyls?
Well, the introduction of the camera. What decade was it? The 1840s, maybe, when the first camera and the first voice recording came out around the 1850s or 1860s. So. No, that's the thing, that the first Napoleon I, Napoleon Bonaparte, he was never photographed. It was only Napoleon III that was photographed, and everyone. Go ahead.
Could you share about? I don't know if you shared the article yet, but it goes in line with this. That you said the Wild West was up for debate here of how much that is real too.
Oh, let me add to this, because on those maps I was talking about with the lakes up in them, that whole region up in there was called No Man's Land. It was actually said that on the map, No Man's Land. Like, you didn't want to go through there. And what they were saying was, and I think you guys have probably all seen this too, but they were saying that there was a city of gold on the hill. And that's why the people went to San Francisco. Now, are any of you aware of the map showing that California was an island at one time?
Yes, and different things of what it maybe been, like whether it's Amazon women, that was theirs. You heard that?
Yeah. Well, there was that, but do you remember what the waterway was between California and the continental U.S.?
The Red Sea.
What was that called?
It was called the Red Sea.
Wow. No, we didn't know that.
Yeah, in fact, it has been. I published an article about a year ago, a little over a year ago. I didn't write it. It was written by a wonderful woman named Christina Bosma, and
she covered this.
Yeah, she has the belief that the United States, North America, is the ancient Holy Land, land of Israel, and that California was perhaps, she hinted at the fact, Egypt. And it's interesting. It's something worth looking into. If they're lying to us about the shape of the earth, if they're lying to us about the shape of history, the shape of mankind, why not lie to us about the shape of our inheritance as well? I don't necessarily take that conclusion, but I'm very open to it. Like, let's just put it this way. Like, when I finally meet Yahusha and he's like, oh, by the way, all those stories, they took place in Australia.
This is when we'll know.
Yeah, all those stories in the Bible, they took place in Australia. I'll be like, cool. Like what, it's not going to surprise. Well, I may be very surprised. I don't know. And you guys have known that I've hinted at the fact that Sean Matthews, who, he just died last Sunday, one of his big things is he kind of thought that Jerusalem, in the Bible, the city of Jerusalem actually took place in what we call the North Pole today. That's something he was looking into, and that's what I loved about him, that he was a guy that had such a he was so open just to look at different possibilities. But yeah.
This is
Where were you going with this, Rick?
When he was talking about the Wild West, it would have been a wild time, all right. And look at the Indians that on record saying that they had killed, smoked out, these giants with red beards and red hair. And when I say Indians, there's a real good chance that the Indians, many of the Indians that we know of today, especially out here in the the Midwest and the plains, from I remember reading this years ago, that when they said that people would come here, that the common denominator, language-wise, the barrier was always broken when somebody could speak Hebrew. And I don't know if anybody's ever heard that or not, but that's something that always came to mind to me when I started looking at the mud flood stuff, because if there was trade going on here long before, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue, there's obviously proof of that. I mean, we have found Medo-Persian type of ships, and not just that, but Phoenician ships, boats, and Viking ships in places that you wouldn't have thought that they'd make it to. Just in my region alone, in Indiana, just to show you guys how wet northern Indiana, lower Michigan, Illinois is that they could take their canoes just about, I'd say about 30 miles east of where I'm at right now. And there was a place where they could put their canoes in the water and they wouldn't have to get out of the water until they got to the Mississippi. They would go through marshland the entire time. And there's maps that show this. You can go here in northern India. There's a little museum up here that you can go to. I'll get this. I'll send this stuff to you. I'm going to start doing some homework assignments for you guys. But I look at this and go, wow, so much has changed just in the last 100 years, 150 years, just in northern Indiana alone. I can't imagine what was going on out in the Grand Canyon. I can't imagine what was going on in, along the coastline out near San Francisco during 1849 when they went out there on a mad gold rush, where if there was a city on the hill and the Red Sea was filled in by an earthquake, by mud going in, and they now call it the Valley, that to me, it really, it really puts a lot of the puzzle pieces together on the whole what if isn't no longer what if, it's what else? Because we're really, I think we're really seeing so many things, and us just even talking about it and gathering together and having prayer. This is fellowship, and this is a time to learn, and we're going to be able to combat if we can come up with these answers. And I you know what? I just want to pray right now, and I just ask you guys to pray with me right now, because right now Father, we just come before you right now with complete humility and a humbleness. We are seeking answers. We are asking for these answers, and I know that you are very clear on this, that if you seek, you shall find, but if we ask, we shall also receive. And I just ask, Father, that whoever's got the ears right now to hear and the eyes to see, Father, that you just put it up on them, that you would just give them the doors to open and the windows to open, and for their eyes to see this evidence and to bring it forth as proof and as truth, and that we can have these answers. We know that's not a salvation issue, but it might be for somebody else. It might be that turning stone for them that could cause an avalanche in their life of good. And so we just ask for that. We ask for wisdom, and we just ask for your guidance and your will to be done in all of this. And I pray in Jesus' name, Yeshua's name, right now. I just pray all that, and I just hope that we can all be your hands and feet down here right now as time just continues to tick on. So guys, I'm telling you, I'm so thankful that I'm able to have these kinds of conversations. I don't get this that often, and I'm just really appreciative of this. So thank you again.
Yeah, and we'll be kind of finishing up here in the next 10 minutes or so, and just to keep to a schedule.
Oh, yeah.
But I wanted to add on the Wild West that will hopefully give everyone a picture of what I believe is going on. Some time ago, I started a series that I never finished, and one of them was called "I Do Not Believe in the 1849 Gold Rush." And essentially, what I was saying is that the 1849 Gold Rush was a hoax. Yes, it really happened in the sense that people rushed out to California and in order to create this westward expansionism, manifest destiny on a kind of how the Masons wanted to tell the story. One of the reasons I stress that it's a hoax is that James Marshall and John Sutter, the founder supposedly of Sacramento, they were never able to produce gold in their lifetime. They died penniless. In terms of gold, they never found it. So to this day, if you go out to California, if you bring enough miners out there, you're going to find gold. In fact, to this day, people still do find gold in California. So there was something going on there, and I started digging into this. And one thing that was really interesting that preceded the California Gold Rush by 1 year was the Donner Party, which, of course, John Sutter was involved in that too, and a lot of Freemasons were involved in that, including the Reed Party, who was with the Donners. There was Jesuits, Freemasons, all involved in this. And what I think is happening now, the Donner Party, when you start digging into it, it is the most ridiculous hoax. It actually starts to make no sense. This whole cannibal story and how the cannibal story actually was getting pushed into the newspapers before the Donner Party was ever discovered. Think about that. How in the world did they know they were eating each other and they hadn't even discovered them yet? Okay, that should be a huge red flag for anybody in the truther community, as we know how they push things in the news. But back then, I don't know. I don't know how people question things back then. But yeah, and Dave's putting up, I had a couple articles, and I had one, a third part that I never finished, that was just going through there was actually, it was broken up into two cannibal parties, and they were all eating each other. And the only ones that were actually really reporting on the cannibalism were the children who grew up. And of course, it would have been very simple to convince those children that they were eating the flesh of other people. They were handed some meat and they were told they were some people or whatever. But one of the reasons I think that story was pushed was because it was a morality tale of, if you guys know anything about the Donner Party, they were supposed to go down the Oregon Trail. And as they're going along, they meet some guy in the desert that says, "Oh no, I've discovered a new trail. And if you buy my map for like however much, $10 or whatever, this will take you there much quicker." And then they went down this path and it was to their destruction. And what they were basically telling everybody was keep to the path, keep to the Oregon Trail. As you go out west, don't, this will be your fate if you steer clear of this. And I think that they were trying to hide railroads. They were trying to hide pre-existing settlements, and these buildings,
keeping
and all
them completely clear of any of the structures that were buried.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that's what was going on. Yeah,
it makes a lot of sense. And I know I brought up the whole pterodactyl picture earlier, and there's a reason why. One of the things that always intrigued me with the American Indians is they had always talked about the Thunderbirds, and what the Thunderbirds were, and that they would take children and all that, and it could have just been a big tale. But the reason why I brought up the whole pterodactyl thing is because if, in fact, let's just say that there was a restoration, so to speak, during the millennial reign, is there a possibility that everything was so unified that once he left, like it was in the garden, so to speak, just completely wonderful. Were the creatures still mean? Were they, or was everything in harmony again during that time? That's a question I had, and the reason why I say that about the whole pterodactyl thing is, what would any of these creatures do to men after Yeshua would depart? And could you? I don't know. I guess I'm losing my train of thought here, but I guess I'm looking at it from the standpoint of, we talked about Bigfoot, we talked about these maps, we talked about the lies, we talked about the Red Sea, we talked about all these things. These things are none of us are making this stuff up. These are things that have been presented to us, but it's never given full attention, obviously, by not just the media but academia. And again, it makes you go, we're told that we're crazy if we even talk about these things or ask about these things. But yet there were newspaper articles, there's old reports, there's people that have diaries kept, there are people that drew pictures. All this stuff is there. And I look at this and go, man, okay, we're at a point in time right now where we know that every time you watch an award show, they're paying homage to, an antichrist entity. They're taking down 10 commandments at courthouses and putting up statues of Baphomet. How much more do we have to realize that Satan's here ruling right now? When are we going to realize that, when I say Satan, I should say the adversary, when are we going to realize that our real true adversary is setting up to where, is he about to show up? What's going on here? Because if that's the case, that we're watching, I don't know, man. I guess my whole point is I see the evil in full swing right now, like never before, and it only makes sense that he has been unleashed and that there others have been unleashed, and that's why you have all these demigods. That's why we have the quote-unquote wandering stars named after different demigods. You have Dagon the fish god, which pays homage to what? The water, the serpent, whatever you want to call it, Leviathan. I just look at this from a standpoint of, guys, I don't know. I honestly, the more I sit here and just even talk about it, it's almost like, duh.
This is where the Millennial Kingdom makes sense, is that we don't have to wait for the Antichrist to appear, because
he's already here.
Exactly.
It's already in full swing. We're waiting for it to happen. It's like, guys, do you not see that they're hypersexualizing our children? Do you not see that they're trying to make them gay? Do you not see that they're teaching this? Sorry.
I'm trying to tell people just like there's a body of Christ, there's a body of Antichrist. There's
Absolutely.
not a man body Christ, it's a collective. It's anybody who is not in the body of Christ is even unwittingly serving or a part of. It has the Antichrist spirit, let's put it that way.
And I think why people can't notice it so easily is because that body is chaotic. So it fights within itself. As you see, all of the nations and governments are fighting amongst each other, but they are in overall unity in that sense. So yeah.
And they're all willing to backstab one another.
Yep.
That plays into the whole, like, there's, the double-sided coin, the two sides of the coin, the controlled opposition, all that.
Yeah,
double-headed eagle.
And we read in Enoch where it talks about when he was going through the first heaven where the fallen angels were, and it was just chaotic. They were all fighting against each other.
Yeah, this has been awesome. I just really appreciate you guys allowing me to come on.
Yeah, Rick, so it's 11 o'clock. We've been on for 2 hours, and I don't want to keep you any longer. Do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you'd like to sum up?
Tread prayerfully. Tread prayerfully. No matter what rabbit hole you go into it prayerfully so that you know that he's the one leading your path in any of this. And be willing to share your information, be willing to question, be willing to test all things. That's what we're here for. This is a learning experience. Whether or not it's the millennial reign post millennial reign or whatever, our job is the job is always the same thing, and it's not a job; it's a passion, and it's to love Him more than anyone or anything, and to continue to keep a humble heart, and like He said, love God and love your neighbor. And there's no better way to show your love to somebody than tell them the truth, regardless of what they're going to think of you. You do it out of love.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hummer, for coming by tonight, and that was very informative and enjoyable, and yeah, I loved it. So we started out with prayer, and would somebody here like to volunteer to close us with a prayer? Anybody at all?
I guess.
Anyone? Bueller?
Rob, go for it.
All right, thank you. Father, we give thanks for this time that we have and coming together and speaking about these things as we seek out the truth, and we all are sharing our thoughts and where we're at and the findings that we are given. And Father, may you continue us down the path. May we stay in prayer and be not deceived, and walk, as Rick said, tread carefully in these things so that we are not deceived, but be open and do these things and sharing them in love. And Father, may you continue to be with us and guide us in our walk, and may we do this with each other and our family and friends, and do it all in love. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
All right, great. So we'll do this again next week.
Man, thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely. We will do this again next week, and we are going through this summer series of reading extra biblical literature, which I will continue, and hopefully we'll touch on another book next week. However, starting out next week, I do have, as promised before, some more Mud Flood information to share, which will include touching on an extra biblical book or a text. And the following week, so in 2 weeks, I will also have some more scriptural research to dig into, which I hinted at a little bit tonight, but I'm going to be taking it in depth and showing scripture of what actually went down, like the rebellion that went down during the millennial reign. So we will see you again, everyone, again next Thursday. And thank you for coming tonight. You guys are free to continue talking, converse as late as you want, but we are officially closing the class. Class is no longer in session. So shalom, everybody.